Okay, so today I'm going to be reading to you all a short story from Lord Dunsany called The Ghosts. And before we begin, a few disclaimers. One, you did not have to click on this video. You do not have to click on this video. You do not have to subscribe. And if you do subscribe, you don't have to watch every video. I know this is different content than I usually do, so just making that known, absolving you of any responsibility you might feel towards me. You don't have to. You don't have to do anything on YouTube. I've wanted to read aloud some stories for a while, and I just haven't gotten around to it, but I thought that The Ghosts by Lord Dunsany, he's an Irish writer who I've been reading a fair bit from recently. I thought this would be a good start because it's quite short, and it's a ghost story that I actually enjoyed, which ghost stories I haven't really tended to like in my time that I have read them. I'm no expert or anything, but the physical or the apparition of ghosts really hasn't interested me that much compared to other horror phenomena like vampires or demons or I don't know if creatures interest me. I like the psychological more than the supernatural in most cases, I think. But it depends on what it represents and how the author does it. I'm not against any such theme just because of what it is. But yes, The Ghosts is a 1908 published story from Lord Dunsany. It's collected in The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories. This is from Project Gutenberg. I'm reading it on my Kobo. Shameless plug because I'm not a Kobo advertiser, or I'm not sponsored, but I do love my Kobo. And I will be reading this aloud and providing some commentary. I think it's a pretty good ghost story, and shouldn't take too long. It should only be like 15 minutes or so. Maybe 10 minutes to read plus some commentary. Before we begin, one, if I'm looking down, I'll be reading off the Kobo. If I'm looking up, I'll be talking to you. And two, this is a manor house ghost story, slightly more modern than the Victorians, but you'll figure it out. It's not too complex. So, without further ado, The Ghosts by Lord Dunsany. The argument that I had with my brother in his great lonely house will scarcely interest my readers. That's awesome. Not those, at least, whom I hope may be attracted by the experiment that I undertook, and by the strange things that befell me in that hazardous region into which so lightly and so ignorantly I allowed my fancy to enter. It was at Haly that I had visited him. Now Haly stands in a wide isolation, in the midst of a dark gathering of old whispering cedars. Haly is the manor house. They nod their heads together when the north wind comes, and nod again and agree, and furtively grow still again, and say no more a while. The north wind is to them like a nice problem among wise old men. They nod their heads over it and mutter about it all together. They know much, those cedars. They have been there so long. And this kind of anthropomorphizing of the cedars and the wind is very typical of Dunsany. He's an important fantasy writer who predates Tolkien. And he's oft to give life to nature and natural things. Referring back to the cedars, their grandsires knew Lebanon, and the grandsires of these were the servants of the king of Tyre, and came to Solomon's court. And this is an allusion to the first book of Kings in the Bible, where Solomon is building his temple, and he buys wood from Lebanon, basically, to help fill out his temple when it's not being stuffed full of gold. And amidst these black-haired children of gray-headed time stood the old house of Haly, I know not how many centuries had lashed against it their evanescent foam of years, but it was still unshattered, and all about it were the things of long ago, as cling strange growths to some sea-defying rock. Here, like the shells of long-dead limpets, was armor that men encased themselves in long ago. Here, too, were tapestries of many colors, beautiful as seaweed. No modern flotsam ever drifted hither, no early Victorian furniture, no electric light. The great trade routes that littered the years with empty meat tins and cheap novels were far from here. Well, well, the centuries will shatter it and drive its fragments on to distant shores. Meanwhile, it yet stood. I went on a visit there to my brother, and we argued about ghosts. So that whole paragraph there, I think it really illustrates what I've detected as strong anti-industrial sentiments from Dunsany. Of course, he was a baron. He was Lord of Dunsany Castle, and he inherited that title at a very young age. So he was set for life, wealth-wise, for the rest of his life, which is why he wrote so much. And that allowed him, I think, the freedom to be a conservationist because he had independent means. But he's very anti-industrial from what I've seen. And also this hearkening back to the house at Haly having old fixtures prior to the Victorians. While it's not calling back to medieval times like a Gothic novel might, it is of that Gothic reimagining of the past kind of theme that we're seeing here. But now the main character will be talking with his brother about ghosts. My brother's intelligence on this subject seemed to me to be in need of correction. He mistook things imagined for things having an actual existence. He argued that second-hand evidence of persons having seen ghosts proved ghosts to exist. I said that even if they had seen ghosts, this was no proof at all. Nobody believes that there are red rats, though there is plenty of first-hand evidence of men having seen them in delirium. Finally, I said I would see ghosts myself, and continued to argue against their actual existence. It's kind of a paradoxical statement, but one of the important things about ghost stories is the ghost actually real, or is it just a figment? And the main character here is in favor of figment, while the brother is less so. He's, I don't know if he's gullible, but he has more faith. So I collected a handful of cigars and drank several cups of very strong tea, and went without my dinner, and retired into a room where there was dark oak, and all the chairs were covered with tapestry. And my brother went to bed bored with our argument, and trying hard to dissuade me from making myself uncomfortable. All the way up the old stairs as I stood at the bottom of them, and as his candle went winding up and up, I heard him still trying to persuade me to have supper and go to bed. So he's not eating, he's indulging in large amounts of caffeine and nicotine in order to induce apparition, perhaps. It was a windy winter, and outside the cedars were muttering, I know not what about, but I think that they were Tories of a school long dead, and were troubled about something new. Within, a great damp log upon the fireplace began to squeak and sing, and struck up a whining tune, and a tall flame stood up over it and beat time, and all the shadows crowded round and began to dance. In distant corners old masses of darkness sat still like chaperones, and never moved. Over there, in the darkest part of the room, stood a door that was always locked. It led into the hall, but no one ever used it. Near that door something had happened once of which the family are not proud. We do not speak of it. There in the firelight stood the venerable forms of the old chairs. The hands that had made their tapestries lay far beneath the soil. The needles with which they wrought were many separate flakes of rust. No one wove now in that old room. No one but the assiduous ancient spiders who, watching by the deathbed of the things of yore, worked shrouds to hold their dust. In shrouds about the cornices already lay the heart of the oak wainscot that the worm had eaten out. So, now in addition to the dark part of the room with the door that's always locked, we have the sinister event of the past that the family does not speak of, which I feel like that has to be kind of common in ghost stories of, like, there's always a reason why the ghost lingers, why they don't just die. And it's often a treacherous, wicked act or something like that that has forced, or the ghost is clinging to that ancient tragedy in order to revenge itself or what have you. But we shall see, we shall continue. Surely at such an hour, in such a room, a fancy already excited by hunger and strong tea might see the ghosts of former occupants. I expected nothing less. The fire flickered and the shadows danced. Memories of strange historic things rose vividly in my mind, but midnight chimed solemnly from a 7-foot clock, and nothing happened. My imagination would not be hurried, and the chill that is with the small hours had come upon me, and I had nearly abandoned myself to sleep, when in the hall adjourning there arose the rustling of silk dresses that I had waited for and expected. Then there entered 2 by 2 the high-born ladies and their gallants of Jacobean times, Jacobean being the reign of King James I of England in the early 1600s after the death of Elizabeth I. They were little more than shadows, very dignified shadows, and almost indistinct. But you have all read ghost stories before, you have all seen in museums the dresses of those times. There is little need to describe them. They entered, several of them, and sat down on the old chairs, perhaps a little carelessly considering the value of the tapestries. Then the rustling of their dresses ceased. So, into the room we have entering 300-year-old lords and ladies. Well, I had seen ghosts, and was neither frightened nor convinced that ghosts existed. I was about to get up out of my chair and go to bed, when there came a sound of pattering in the hall, a sound of bare feet coming over the polished floor, and every now and then a foot would slip, and I heard claws scratching along the wood, as some 4-footed thing lost and regained its balance. I was not frightened, but uneasy. The pattering came straight towards the room that I was in. Then I heard the sniffing of expectant nostrils. Perhaps uneasy was not the most suitable word to describe my feelings then. Suddenly, a herd of black creatures, larger than bloodhounds, came galloping in. They had large, pendulous ears. Their noses were to the ground, sniffing. They went up to the lords and ladies of long ago and fawned about them disgustingly. Their eyes were horribly bright and ran down to great depths. When I looked into them, I knew suddenly what these creatures were, and I was afraid. They were the sins, the filthy, immortal sins of those courtly men and women. How demure she was, the lady that sat near me on an old-world chair. How demure she was, and how fair, to have beside her with its jowl upon her lap a sin with such cavernous red eyes, a clear case of murder. And you, yonder lady with the golden hair, surely not you, and yet that fearful beast with the yellow eyes slinks from you to yonder courtier there, and whenever one drives it away, it slinks back to the other. Over there a lady tries to smile as she strokes the loathsome furry head of another sin, but one of her own is jealous and intrudes itself under her hand. Here sits an old nobleman with his grandson on his knee, and one of the great black sins of the grandfather is licking the child's face and has made the child its own. Sometimes a ghost would move and seek another chair, but always his pack of sins would move behind him. Poor ghosts, poor ghosts! How many flights they must have attempted for 200 years from their hated sins! How many excuses they must have given for their presence, and the sins were with them still, and still unexplained. Suddenly one of them seemed to scent my living blood and bayed horribly. and all the others left their ghosts at once and dashed up to the sin that had given tongue. The brute had picked up my scent near the door by which I had entered, and they moved slowly nearer to me, sniffing along the floor, and uttering every now and then their fearful cry. I saw that the whole thing had gone too far, but now they had seen me. Now they were all about me. They sprang up, trying to reach my throat, and when their claws touched me, horrible thoughts came into my mind, and unutterable desires dominated my heart. I planned bestial things as these creatures leaped around me, and planned them with a masterly cunning. A great red-eyed murder was among the foremost of these furry things from whom I feebly strove to defend my throat. Suddenly it seemed to me good that I should kill my brother. It seemed important to me that I should not risk being punished. I knew where a revolver was kept. After I had shot him, I would dress the body up and put flour on the face like a man that had been acting as a ghost. It would be very simple. I would say that he had frightened me, and the servants had heard us talking about ghosts. There were one or two trivialities that would have to be arranged, but nothing escaped my mind. Yes, it seemed to me very good that I should kill my brother, as I looked into the red depths of the creature's eyes. But one last effort as they dragged me down. If two straight lines cut one another, I said, the opposite angles are equal. Let A, B, C, D cut one another at E. Then the angles CEA, CEB equal two right angles. Proposition 8. Also, CEA, AED equal two right angles. I can explain that in a bit. I moved towards the door to get the revolver. A hideous exultation arose among the beasts. But the angle CEA is common, therefore AED equals CEB. In the same way, CEA equals DEB, QED. It was proved. Logic and reason re-established themselves in my mind. There were no dark hounds of sin. The tapestried chairs were empty. It seemed to me an inconceivable thought that a man should murder his brother. The end. Now, I'll talk about the ending later. I really like this story for the fact of the creatures, what the narrator says to be sins that attach themselves to each of the ghostly presences that have entered the room with the narrator. And there's another discussion to be had about, are these ghosts real or not? Is it just the figment of his lack of sleep, lack of food, caffeine, nicotine, extravaganza? Or was it actually real? It seems that by these mathematical equations or propositions or postulations, that the narrator has vanished the ghosts just through his mind, so it seems like they were all in his mind to begin with. But what it unnerves me is always the psychological and the paranoia of these machinations of the mind or of the spiritual world, if that exists in this story, could give way to action, in that when the beasts overtake the narrator, he begins to plot to kill his brother, where there has been no sense of conflict between the two other than annoyance and gripes over their supernatural theorizings. Or it seems like they're on good terms otherwise, but he immediately plans definitely a cunning plot to kill his brother and get away with it in these few seconds. And he goes for the revolver in his room before he can finally ward off whatever is afflicting him, which I thought that was pretty creepy. And actually, one second, I have something over here. I wrote this down yesterday. So in the end, he starts doing some math stuff, and it's kind of weird. He's just saying when two straight lines cut each other across, this and this, these angles are equal, and these angles are equal, and these angles add up to 180 degrees. Very simple math, even I can understand it. But what I think that represents is the example I thought of was it for people with male genitalia. If you have a surprise erection and you're trying to get rid of it, you're like thinking of like something disgusting that would get it down really quick. That's like the same concept, I think. He's trying to distract himself with something really boring. But in this case, he's also trying to distract himself from the supernatural with the logical, with the natural, because math would be natural. It exists in the natural world, whereas ghosts, if they were to exist, would be... If they were to exist, they would be natural, actually, but the supernatural is the more than natural, the extra natural, because it is beyond. So he reestablishes logic into the world with right angles, which is interesting. So, yeah, but that's it. That's one story by Lord Dunsany. I would say he's at almost his most lucid in this story. He's not a very down-to-earth writer otherwise, but this is incredibly down-to-earth. He's more... I think he's more ethereal. He's more... he's more out there in his fantasy writings, but this is a more tame story. But I think it's really good otherwise. But yeah, if you did watch or listen, thank you. Let me know what you thought. I'm probably going to do more of these. It's not going to dominate my content schedule or my content by any means, but I would like to read aloud more things. And if not to, I know it won't do well in the YouTube sense, but I would like to have a big playlist of things that I've read aloud. One, just so people can see that if they want to hear someone give commentary on a story. And two, just because I think it's fun. And I had a great time doing that, actually. So, yeah, that's it. I'll talk to you later.